Morning, everyone. First, I wanted to say thank you to the Problem Gambling Network of Ohio for the opportunity to say a few words this morning. Again, my name is Jessica McGrady. I am the Regulatory Compliance Officer here at Hollywood Casino in Toledo. We are a part of the Penn National Gaming family. Hollywood Toledo is a casino, which means we both have table games and slot machines. While I have many different duties here at Toledo, one really important part of my job is overseeing our responsible gaming program. If you've had an opportunity on Tuesday, you may have listened in to hear Jim Baldacci speak about Penn National Gaming's commitment to our responsible gaming program. Here at the property level, promoting responsible gaming is a part of every department, from food and beverage to security officers, even employees in our back of house offices. Everyone receives training on responsible gaming when they are hired in, and they also receive a refresher training every year. The training includes recognizing and identifying signs of problem gambling, the voluntary exclusion program, underage gambling, and responsible alcohol service. Employees are also made aware of the location of responsible gambling information that can be provided to our guests. These brochures are located all different areas of the casino, including cage and ATMs. The brochures include information on responsible gambling, along with names and locations of treatment centers. Here at Toledo, I know personally, I've given a few tours. I think Derek had organized to some local people who wanted to come in and just see what the casino's about. And I showed them around, let them look around, let them see what these guests are feeling when they're at our property. We've also invited some of the treatment centers to come on property and hand out information to guests, so that they are able to promote their facility as well and what kind of services that they offer. We're also committed to participating in promoting the voluntary exclusion program. The program's run jointly by the Ohio Casino Control Commission and the Ohio Lottery Commission. The program allows for guests to sign up to exclude themselves not only from our property, but also casinos and racinos all over the state of Ohio. Here at Penn, it's our policy that if you exclude yourself from one of our properties, you'll be excluded from all 40 plus properties that we operate. The program is a great tool for someone who may have some issues with gambling. It's well run and maintained. All credit going out to the Ohio Casino Control Commission, Lottery Commission, for their efforts on that and just putting together a great program. Now, enough about me. I'm here today to introduce your speaker, Director of Compliance at Hard Rock Cincinnati, Robert Wamsley. Robert is a retired naval officer with 20 years of compliance experience in the healthcare and gaming industry. Robert has been the Director of Compliance at Cincinnati since opening in 2012, focusing on gaming, non-gaming, and responsible gaming. Prior to working in the gaming industry, Robert worked at Christ Hospital and other hospital systems in Washington and Idaho after retiring from the U.S. Navy. I've personally had the pleasure of knowing and working with Robert for the past couple of years in compliance. We go to meetings and he's just a wealth of knowledge, great guy, knows a ton about compliance and a ton about responsible gaming efforts as well. So I will pass it on to Robert, and I hope you guys have a great session listening to what he has to say.
Thanks, Jess. I really appreciate that. And hopefully this will be the only technical issue. I'm going to give a thanks here to a lot of people, but Corey really helped me because I am absolutely technically not efficient with anything. So I am going to try to share my screen here and make sure that we have everything going. Let me bring up my presentation. There we go. Can everybody see that all right?
You'll have to, Robert, hit the green share screen button at the bottom.
Okay. Honest to goodness, Corey did do this and made sure I was fine. There we go. Now share, right?
Yep. And then you'll just hit from beginning.
There we go. Thank you, Corey. Appreciate that. Make sure they pay you a little bit extra. That was fantastic. Guys, I'm thrilled to be here today. And nothing says gaming as the excitement of compliance. And I love what I do, and I love working with these great people. We were talking a little bit before we even started today about collaboration. It was 7 years ago. I attended my first responsible gaming conference in the state of Ohio in Columbus, and the maturity and how things have changed since that time is fantastic. Um, a couple of housekeeping things. You'll notice I'm from the greatest city of the greatest state of the United States of America, Boston, Massachusetts. Then you have to ask, okay, you say you're from Boston, but where are you really from? I'm from Wellesley. There are different sets of accents all around, but hopefully I'll tame myself down a bit. I do not sound like Mark Wahlberg. A lot of us don't like him. That's a personal thing. As Derek said, we all have our opinions. So we do have Jimmy's, we do have Bubbles, we do have Packies and Stadies, but I have learned, hopefully, not to use those terms too much out and about. As Jess said, who's a great partner with everybody. I've been in compliance for a while. I'm a very proud naval veteran, retired from the Navy, loved that, got into law firms in Seattle, which was my last duty station, and was called because we had a large client that was a hospital system in the Seattle area. And this was at the beginning of compliance, and they wanted to have a compliance officer, knew nothing what they were talking about. And that's how I got into it. When we've had you great people in this industry visit us to take a look at our casinos with regards to responsible gaming, and we focus that, just like Jess and all, we take you around the floor, we show you where our RG is, we show you our signs and things. But I always make statements about, well, when we do this, when we do this. And that's how the impetus of this talk kind of came to be, was understanding what a compliance officer does in the state of Ohio. And I'll make that deference quite a bit and explain it a little bit different, because the legislature, I think, brilliantly set up compliance officers to succeed in the state and do what they do. So we'll go into that. Anytime, do a chat, and I ask my good partners out there to let me know when somebody asks a question, because as my daughters will tell you, I love to talk and talk and talk. And I found it interesting. Let's start off with one thing I didn't plan this morning over my cup of coffee at 5 a.m. because I can't break that tradition from the Navy of getting up early and having a cigar, which is not a Navy tradition, but my coffee certainly is. I was reading the Boston Globe this morning, and there was an article about 2 Patriot players among professional athletes threatened by sports gamblers per officials. And I started to read this, and an individual who lost $100,000 on a Super Bowl bet in 2019 threatened 2 players on the Patriots after he lost the $100,000 to cause violence against their family, actually murdering, he suggested, and all. I thought that was kind of poignant about what you all do to try to help out in the state. It's always there, it's always underlining, and we certainly don't want to see that type of behavior. And I feel so lucky in the state of Ohio to be able to reach out when we have issues. I think this is too extreme, obviously, but I think it's just poignant that it's always out there. Again, big thank you to Derek. He's been fabulous, known him since day one. Mike Bizzelli, good friend, good collaborator. To Corey, brand new met when we had them here on the property, fantastic. OCCC, who regulates our casino. Amanda Blackford, we have the Lottery Commission, Karen Russo, know her well. Scott at the Ohio Mental Health and Addictive Services, and our local people as well. We couldn't do it without you. Sometimes the compliance people feel we're a little bit on an island when we do our job, and you guys are great people that way. So you heard a little bit about me. That's who I am, I thought it'd be interesting to talk about protecting our patrons and keeping our employees and employers out of trouble, hopefully, and explain kind of what we do and tie it all into RG. Now, here's the good legal thing, right? The views and oppressions, that was a Freudian slip from compliance, expressed in this presentation are my own. They don't necessarily reflect Hard Rock or my parents, so that is out of the way that way. We have some goals we want to talk about today. I want you to learn about what compliance does in Ohio. I say under the OAC, which is the Ohio Administrative Code. Obviously, the Ohio law governs it as well, and I'll talk about the brilliance of how the legislature, how the Ohio Casino Control Commission does that. I want you to know what a compliance officer does outside of responsible gaming to help it tie into responsible gaming. Help you know what a compliance officer does with regards to responsible gaming, though so many of you already know that. We talk about that quite a bit. Help you learn about the complex nature of compliance and all we touch, our relationships with OCCC, our relationships with other agencies, and put a little plug in for Players Edge, which is a Hard Rock responsible gaming program. Most of you, or a lot of you, have probably heard our Vice President of Global Social Responsibility, Paul Pellizzari, who works for Hard Rock. He's nationally known, the program's award-winning, and I feel so incredibly lucky to have that as a program here to help individuals, and we'll talk a little bit about that. I told you I'm retired from the United States Navy, worked at law firms. I kind of all worked at that. I worked in healthcare, which I loved. That's what brought me to Ohio, was to work at the Christ Hospital. I worked there for 3 years as they were going through some what's called a corporate integrity agreement with the government. Fantastic clinicians, doctors, nurses, frontline people, all of them fantastic. After 3 years and being in compliance in healthcare for about 20 years, I decided to change something a little bit different, and the opportunity to come into gaming happened that way. You'll know I bring my daughters into this quite a bit, and my family, things of this nature. One story I'd like to say, I talk about how much I have a passion for compliance and love compliance. I'm a little odd that way. When I retired from the Navy and went to a hospital system as a compliance officer, all of you are very, very familiar with HIPAA. And I'd mentioned a few times over the dinner table about being responsible for HIPAA in our hospitals, in our psychiatric areas, and in our research. I have certification in healthcare compliance and research compliance and privacy compliance. I then 3 weeks later attended a conference for my daughter's schooling where the teacher was very excited to meet me. I just assumed it was because of my personality. She sat down with me and said, "I'm very excited to meet somebody who works with hippos. What zoo do you work at?" It took a little bit for us to understand that she misunderstood that I work with compliance laws and HIPAA. She was so uninterested with me after that, but the thing as a father that was the toughest was going home that night over dinner and explaining to my daughter that I actually don't work with HIPAA. I work with a law called HIPAA, the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. She still loves me this day, 22 years later, but I think that's a bit of an odd right there. See on the screen some of our guiding lights that we take a look at in compliance that we use as our guiding lights, as our laws. In Ohio, under the Ohio Revised Code, Chapter 3722 is casino gaming. Again, all of these out there you can take a look at and see and look at the laws and see the things that we take a look at. We do the Ohio Administrative Code, which has chapters about how we should operate for the protection of our patrons, for the protection of gaming in the state of Ohio, which I think is really important, is a key. I do this job as neither passion or prejudice, and I'll explain how we are hired and how it happens in the state of Ohio. And we really do focus in on that and making sure we're protecting our patrons, we're protecting our employers, that we report to the Ohio Casino Control Commission, and how we work with them. You'll see there 377212 is the voluntary exclusion and compulsive and problem gambling plan requirements. Just talked a little bit about that as well. And then I wanted to let you know about our casino operators organization, because having worked in a hospital, having worked at a law firm, and I'll never tell tales out of school, I can only talk about things that are public record. We represented some utilities and others with Enron, and to see how corporate compliance structures are developed in the private world, where they may fall, and how Ohio decided to do that, I think is super important and very, very interesting. Okay, so we are going to continue now. I call this the Mozart move of brilliance, and here's the reason why. Hard Rock, when you get your employee badge, and again, I've worked with Horseshoe and Jack, and then we were purchased by Hard Rock last year. So I've been here 8 years, never left the building, but third company, and love working with Hard Rock. We had a name tag with our name, and then we could put our favorite musical band, group, singer underneath. And you see mine is Mozart. I have people stop me on the floor thinking that is my last name, and they think that's very unique. But that's why I call this a Mozart move of brilliance, because looking and working at law firms that sued companies because of compliance reasons, the pressure of a compliance officer not to report things, where they report in that organization. For example, Enron, while a very senior compliance person finally blew the whistle on that. It was somebody lower who actually started, but their job was threatened, their compensation was threatened, things didn't go well. I think Ohio, the legislature, in coordination with the Ohio Casino Control Commission, Lottery Commission, what have you, really took a look at this intelligently 3-4 years before we even opened up. The law was passed, and they looked, what does this compliance officer do? There are so many things that can go wrong. You know, I don't speak ill of our industry at all. I think we've gotten much better, but you know, let's also face it, there were days that gambling was only allowed in Vegas, only allowed in New Jersey, and there was more of a criminal element that ran that, and how individuals were taking a look at or what they did with patrons. There's been a very intelligent way that compliance has been taking a look at, particularly for gaming in the last few years, and OCCC really took a look at that. You can see this article right here. It's an Ohio Administrative Code, and I promise not to read too much. I'd rather have a cup of coffee with somebody and talk about what we do, but we are required to have a regulatory compliance department supervised by a regulatory compliance officer located at the casino. I look after the laws 3772, state and local. That's very, very important. And there's some federal ones that we'll talk about as well. The regulatory compliance officer shall report directly to one of the following regarding matters of policy, purpose, responsibility, and authority. And they shall also control the hiring, termination, and salary of the compensation of the compliance officer's position. So you either report to the casino's chief compliance officer or another position that's approved by the executive director of the commission, which is incredibly important. You'll hear us use terms switch over, like just talked about being the regulatory compliance officer. I'm the director of compliance. And my other two compadres at their properties might be called something else, but we use regulatory compliance officer. You'll see a chart here in a second where I report up to, and I have to hold what's called the highest level of license in the state of Ohio. There are two levels of licenses, not to bore you too much, but one is a key license and one is a general gaming license. Most of the individuals at a casino have a gaming license. They're all good for 3 years, and they need it to work in the slots, in table games, in marketing, in finance, and the other various areas. The legislature, the OCCC, says, hey, to be a VP, a property president, the head of compliance, the head of table games, head of slots, head of marketing, et cetera, we need to have an individual who has the highest level, and it's called a key license. And it's a 66-page application with another set of attachments. We do our taxes, we do everything. They take a look. They're making sure that an individual that goes into this position understands what he's doing or she is doing, that they're not going to be handcuffed in any way by an organization coming in and saying, you will not report this, or we will do this. I don't care what the law says. That compensation for that individual is thought of by another individual to make sure, and that's so important. So I hold what's called a key license. 13 of us here at our property hold the key license. It's pretty similar to the other casinos here in the state of Ohio. It's good every 3 years. And I think that's important too. We're reevaluated at the end of 3 years. We have requirements where we have to let the Ohio Casino Control Commission know if anything's changed in our background. I recently moved, we bought a new house. I had to let the Casino Control Commission know that I bought a new house. If there was anything that went against us legally, somebody sued us or we sued somebody else, or there was either a criminal or civil lawsuit against us for any reason, we let the commission know that. The reason is they're not trying to be big brother necessarily. They're making sure that the individuals that have significant responsibilities, have significant decision-making at the property are the right individuals, that there's good morals there, that they're not beholden to somebody. For example, we wouldn't want a chief financial officer who might have been convicted of embezzling. That doesn't happen because they take a look at the background. You can't start your position until you have that license as well. Everybody in my department has a gaming license as well as most of the other departments. We switch over here and you will see me getting coffee and water every now and then, so I do appreciate that. This is a piece out of our structure and our internal controls, which is kind of our Bible in the world about how we do things here. And you can see over to the left-hand side, you can see my position, the Director of Compliance, the Director of Surveillance, and our internal audit departments report to the COO, of Cincinnati LLC. That is a long, boring term to say. I report to John Lucas. He's the president of Hard Rock International. I think that's significant. When I went into hospital compliance, a very dear friend of mine who was a commanding officer of a Navy Legal Service office that I went to, who went on to become the Judge Advocate General of the United States Navy, Bruce McDonald, told me, Robert, never take a job in compliance where you don't have a voice at the table as a leader. Paul Pellizzari, who I mentioned earlier, talks about that in his lectures, that when he was approached and wanted to join Hard Rock, one of the things that he insisted on was that he had a voice at the table, what his reporting structure would be. You will see over and over and over again in articles about compliance, about what the government does for finable actions in the finance world and compliance. And we'll talk about Title 31 and anti-money laundering here in a little bit. In those areas, including healthcare, where I work with the Office of Civil Enforcement and DHHS and all, is tone at the top. You can have an individual say, he's your compliance guy. If you've ever seen the movie Boiler Room, they have a compliance person, they make a specific note about this guy being over here, and the only thing he really does is get lunch for people. He's paid a big salary, has a big title, but has no responsibilities. OCCC takes a look at that very carefully. So does the Lottery Commission. So does the IRS when they come in and audit us from a Title 31 perspective. So does local governments, what have you. And I wouldn't take a position if I can't be at the table and say, no, we will not do this, or yes, maybe we can do this. And we look at that very seriously. A good friend of mine who was a compliance officer at Enron, who was so excited to be there and was doing well. I remember in the last days talking with him, and 401k, which was fantastic. It was less than 3 cents per share at that time, about the talks of you will do this, you will not do this, you will do as we say. That's the brilliance of this structure that we talk about right here. Is my boss is the president of the company I can go to. I work in Cincinnati. I work and live out of the executive office suite. I'm on the leadership team. I make those talks. We provide input to our new casinos that are opening in Indiana and in Illinois. And I feel incredibly valued that way. Another indication, which I think is great, and we've had it at this property, and I think all the other casinos do as well, is when we reach out and talk about responsible gaming and want to talk about sponsorships and talk about being a non-revenue producing department, even though I say we save us from fines, so we are revenue producing, is, hey, I would like to do this. I would like to do this with this group. I need a little bit of money. The tone at the top always is immediately get it, understand, and do it. So that's where you can see our report here. I do talk to the president here. We call it a president instead of a general manager, but it's the same thing. I report to him, or I work with him here at this property, have a weekly meeting with him, have other meetings with him. And what I've been very lucky with, he and my last general manager, Chad, who is up in Jack in Cleveland, is walk in any day at any time, knock on the door, call them at home, call them on the weekend and say, we have this issue. This is happening. This is happening with a patron, and I would like to do that. And they're very good at that. We talked a little bit about holding a key level license in the state of Ohio. And you can see these are the types of things that OCCC takes a look at it for it. You know, I can say that I can be in this job because I've shown by clear and convincing evidence that I have suitability for licensure. I have good character, honesty, and integrity. Even though I am from Boston, Massachusetts, I may not be able to say that if I was a New York Yankee. I have financial stability, integrity, and responsibility. That's so important. Sometimes we're asked about that. It's again from the standpoint that I should not be subject to any type of financial influence to make a decision. A patron that I might know out in the community who comes here who's having an issue with responsible gaming, issue with divorce actions, things of that nature, not paying me money to look the other way. And we're looked at this every 3 years, and the background checks and the in-depth nature of it can seem daunting, but it's incredibly important for us and incredibly important that we do that for our patrons and ensuring that the right individual is here. And the person has to stand up also to the people on the property. Table games being the largest department and having to tell the director of table games or the vice president of table games, no, we can't do this, or we can't decide to do this bet, or this game doesn't exist, or no, we can't just go without notifying OCCC or getting some approvals on our what are called internal controls about how we do our job every day. The person has to be able to stand up, and that it reflects on my team as well. My compliance manager, Eric, could step into my position immediately. I try not to tell him that too many times, so I'm not pushed down the stairs. I'm not quite ready to retire, but pretty soon. But he can do the same, holds that position, holds his employment that way. So somebody will not have the influence to say, we are going to fire you because you will look the other way if we have a voluntary excluded person on property. Don't worry about it. Don't report it. We have to have that ability to do that. They look at if we have had any bankruptcies ever. We've had a complaint filed at federal, state, or local areas. Other history with other jurisdictions, I think is very important. I'm new to gaming. I'd never been to a casino before I started working. I'm not a gambler. I didn't have that interest. I shouldn't say I never went to a casino. In healthcare, most of our conferences were in Vegas or New Orleans or Chicago. So obviously we were at casinos there, but I didn't gamble and didn't understand that necessarily. Every place is different as they take a look at licensing. And again, great contribute to the legislature and OCCC about how they take a look at it. And I don't want to ever make them sound like they're being too draconian as well. They're not. The first function, and I'm saying this, that OCCC, I think, takes a look at is the protection of gaming for the patrons and for the citizens, even if you don't gamble here, for the citizens of Ohio, because those tax dollars that are given by these casinos, by these racinos, et cetera, going into the general operating fund and helping various areas, it's important that it's protected and that somebody is taking a look at that specifically. Whether or not we've looked at, been a defendant in litigation over 15 years, again, this is for a key license specifically. What we've cooperated with agencies before, and I talked about Enron. I was not on the Enron side, but was in litigation with companies that our law firm represented at that time, and what we had to do and what we've had to testify for, things of this nature, and that we provide accurate and complete information. I smile a little bit at that because it's important. OCCC takes a look at everything, very specific with your licensing. And it goes a long way if you're very honest and say, hey, I might have had this problem at this time, or this might have happened at this time. They look and they evaluate. With that, with anything you do, telling the truth is 9/10 of the way through. There are certain things that can't be overlooked, obviously, but working with them on it. But you don't report it, you don't talk about it, you don't let them know that this has happened is something that's very significant. I'm gonna take a drink of water real quick here. So again, I can't overestimate that I've been at places where I might have had an interview where somebody's wanted me to come in and I talk about compliance and about how it is set up. And it's like, well, yeah, you're kind of over here and you kind of really, you'll report up to the finance department. Finance people are great, but a compliance person should not report, in my personal opinion. When you take a look at how corporate compliance structures are done outside of gaming, that are done in Fortune 500 companies, hospitals, manufacturing, small healthcare clinics, you name it. Compliance being so important because of Sarbanes-Oxley, about financial problems that have happened with companies such as WorldCom and Enron and several others. It's really important to see how that is. Federal government has really focused in on that, particularly in the last couple of years. And then very bright organizations have said, hey, we want the compliance person to be in that area, to be able to say no. And conversely, I talk about, hopefully, I do like to speak, and fortunately, Derek and Mike and Corey and Scott Anderson and a few others have been subject to my very bad sense of humor. I do that also specifically, not only do I love to talk and do I love people, but sometimes I find compliance people draconian, and I don't want that. When I talk to a group of new employees here specifically, and I do that every single week, and then I go out to the different departments and talk with them as well, is I joke around, I do a little joke, I do some lawyer jokes, I do compliance jokes, and they are out there if you can believe that. Because I don't want to be the person that's always going, no, 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 and somebody's scared. A incredibly successful compliance person will be open to an individual come and talk with them. I tell them to come into my office at any time. But hey, you don't want to come to the executive suite because you're worried about your job. There's something that has happened, something you wish to report. And you're worried about some individuals walking in. Why was John Smith talking to Robert? Why was Mary Brown talking to Robert? I'll come and talk to you. I've met with employees outside of the casino, at Starbucks or what have you, and have talked about issues. And keep it 100% private. That's what's great with working with partners like the OCCC as well, because at some point I need to perhaps disclose that information. And one deal I always talk with them is, I'm still investigating it, wanted you to know about this at this moment, but I'll provide a full report, and just keeping them advised of it. But I don't want to seem draconian. I want the person to be able to come and talk to me and be able to relate an issue or problem, something that's happening, so we can take a look at it and see if it needs to be evaluated. And that has happened to me in my career. Thank goodness, only one time here, but it has happened previously at a hospital where I had to go to the board of directors and talk about a chief financial officer. It's tough. It is had to do, but that's the job that you are hired for. You have to sit in front of them, you have to talk to them, and you have to tell them the news. Nothing gets better by holding on to it, by ignoring it, by burying your head in the sand. That only works with baseball scores and my Boston Red Sox lately. But in this environment, we have to be open. And I want all levels of employees to be able to come and talk to me, and our patrons too. And I'll certainly talk with them outside of this organization. We try to go to great lengths, particularly responsible gaming. Obviously, we don't want an individual to come here on property, so we'll talk via phone. We'll talk however that we can with that individual. I told you nothing says excitement like compliance, and I'll tell a story about that towards the end with compliance. But unlike maybe other areas in the United States, again, because it's so set up well here by the legislature, by OCCC, by what have you, a compliance officer looks at more than just something called Title 31 anti-money laundering. That's a huge part of our business. We'll talk a little bit about that. But as I always say to employees, nothing happens at a casino without compliance being involved. You can't do, as you see, table games. We look at a table game. We have to talk about how a table game is moved in, who the manufacturer is, how it comes on property. We have to talk about a layout. We have to get the layout approved by a vendor that is recognized by the state of Ohio. We have to ensure that information printed on that layout is exactly right and matches our internal controls. We have to make sure that it is the correct length, breadth, width. We have to ensure that surveillance can look down on it, that it's not miscolored whatsoever. And then after the compliance department takes a look at it and approves it, we send it to the state of Ohio. They take a look at it as well, and they match it. They ask questions. It's not until they finally approve it that we can even go out and order the layouts to come there. We have to provide them with what our table games rules are, how we do bets, how things are going to be thrown out on the table, how many positions we have around a craps table or what's called a cannibal game, what we have, where we have, and table games. Slots, we have two different types of people in the slots department. We have somebody who works inside the electronics, who are incredibly smart people, that ensuring that the integrity match is there. We have individuals on the outside helping to pay out, but taking a look to see if an individual owes back child support in the state of Ohio, if somebody is a VEP and should not obtain that at all. We take a look at the slot machines themselves, how they get here. We tell the state when we move them on the floor. We tell the state how they pay out, what is the percentage of that. That is inspected constantly. We look at the software. We work in cooperation with OCCC. They approve that software and they inspect us quite a bit on that to make sure that we are good there. Responsible gaming, as we all know, we all talk about, and I'm going to book that in at the end. Incredibly important here in the state of Ohio, what we do, how we work with you, and facilitate that. Licensing, we work with the other departments. We tell them after we've worked with Ohio, who needs a gaming license, what level do they need a gaming license. Generally, everybody needs at least what's called a G license, except for food and beverage. Our VP of food and beverage does, because he comps sometimes here, never alcohol. It's not allowed in the state, which is great. But we do other type of comping. So he has to have a gaming license in case he wishes to do a food voucher for somebody. And then our vice president of human resources has to demonstrate all the different items I talked about as well. But then all the other departments, almost everybody has a gaming license in there and they're taking a look at. And it's an interesting process. And we look at that very, very, very hard to make sure we get the right person in. We look at cards, same things. We have cards, they have to look a certain way, they have to say a certain way. Obviously, casinos like to have their own imprints of what company they work at. We do that, but we send all that artwork to the state for their review, approval before we even order them. And then we come in and then we have a way to destroy them to ensure they're not used back on a table again. Dice, fascinating to me. Again, never was a gambler and we had to learn all this, but what the color of the dice look in the security features and what the material is and what the color is it being picked up, what happens if a patron accidentally throws one off the table, where they're kept, what their size is, what their weight is, things of this nature. We have a gaming designation where we can and can't game on a casino floor. If we decide we want to open up an area, for example, when we have the Hard Rock Cafe, we're looking at maybe moving a couple of gaming tables a little closer to a certain area. We have to go to the state of Ohio first and ask permission to do that. They review it, see if it makes sense. They provide letters for us before we can even start thinking about doing any type of gaming in that area. We do investigations, as I mentioned a little bit earlier. We take a look at just about everything from an investigative standpoint. Did a patron get cheated? Did somebody sue us? You don't know how often I have a subpoena served on me, either from a divorce action, somebody wants to know who's gambling here, or, hey, this person cheated me, and we go over and it's usually a small claims court and we plead our case that way. But then there are investigations if there is any type of improper conduct from a superior to a subordinate. We find out somebody is doing something incorrectly. We have a robust amount of audits. I won't bore you with, but just know audits that my department does and other departments do that are layered on top of what the Ohio Casino Control Commission takes a look at, and we have to provide audits on to ensure individuals are doing. And then sometimes it just falls into your place. Somebody comes into your office and wants to talk, or you find out something quite accidental. You take a look at it and you talk to the OCCC about that. Take a look at marketing. Marketing is my favorite department. I hope I don't insult any marketers on here, but they're as I joke about my Achilles heel, listen, marketers are great people. They're not like me. They're on that right side of the brain and they're trying to develop this. But we have to kind of talk with them and say there is a responsible gaming element to ensure that we do as we go out. We don't want to market to individuals that either are restricted from gaming or game, but ask, hey, I don't want your marketing material. I don't want it to be sent to me. And we work with Amanda, who I've talked about a lot, and I don't want to seem psychoscience about that at all, but she's a great partner to be able. I can call her up and say, hey, and we're thinking about this. What do you think? We'll lay it all out in a formal presentation, but she's great about talking through that and making sure we've thought about all the elements of it. And kind of off the side note here, I think that's one of the fantastic things to see was we hold a quarterly responsible gaming, anti-money laundering and compliance committee meeting where the top leaders of our property and our company sit down and have to listen to me for over an hour and a half, talk about anti-money laundering, threats that we've had, problems, things that we have reported. We talk about compliance generally, and then I have a very large section about responsible gaming. I was thrilled and a bit nervous, but we had Derek and we had Corey and we had Amanda come in October. And Paul Polizari from Florida, our VP of Global Gaming Responsibilities, I told you, great guy, even though he is Canadian. And I said that just for you, Paul, is they came and they listened to us in a completely open discussion. I asked that things that were said that were private, we do keep them private for obvious reasons, but we talk of a lot of information. And we started with RG and we wanted their opinion on this. And listening to Corey, listening to Derek, and listening to Amanda, who we relate with a lot, but particularly Derek and Corey, there was interesting to get their opinions. What I loved was we continued on with the meeting, and Derek and Corey and Amanda went and disappeared with Paul. And what I loved, Paul was like, hey, is it working at this property? Because who watches the watcher? I'm saying all these great things we do, but who's ensuring that Robert Wamsley is doing his job every day? And we have levels on top of that to ensure what I do, what I report is truthful, and is so well taken care of that. But I appreciate it. I want to say that real quick about Derek and about Corey, because what I loved, again, they were like compliance. They didn't do it with passion. They didn't do it with prejudice. They said, we really like this. We think this could change, and then provided some great ideas with regards to how we work in the community and we get more community involvement that way. One of those stories I'll tell is just recently, every second Sunday, I go to a piece of Christ Lutheran Church in Cincinnati that is in an area that has been hit very hard economically, and they provide breakfast for the homeless. And a lot of us go down there and do it, and it's incredibly humbling work. And I'd been doing that for a long time. And then I heard this talk from Derek and from Corey and from Mike Bazzelli and a few others saying, you know, listen and get outside your box. My spouse tells me to get outside of my box all the time because I'm so New England this way. We were serving breakfast there, and I happened to stand outside for a second to get some air. And I was talking to one of the individuals getting breakfast. And I had never known, and I'd seen this individual, I don't know how many times, walk across the alley. I asked where he was from. He was, and I try not to get too emotional here because I'm a crusty New Englander and I have no emotion. He was a military person that was homeless. I work with homeless vets, but in an organization in Cincinnati where we have a hotel, we get them there, we get them on their feet, they're transitioning. This was from the VA. They had been drug abuse, they had alcohol problems, they had gaming problems. And they were just getting their first meal. We gave them gloves, we gave them other things. It was because I just happened to walk across and saw that we started talking. And my property president jumped in and said, we are going to go over there. We're going to do a special program for them and make sure. That's that collaboration, that getting people to think outside the box. And what I think so many people listening today and that I've heard throughout the week are great talking to individuals with. You see there, we work with I work with the state and city liquor license department to make sure we have licenses. That we do the proper training for our individuals here from a responsible gaming and just alcohol awareness side. We recently did safe and sound protocols about masks, plexiglass. We have this great thing that looks like something from Ghostbusters, and where you walk around and it atomizes the chips and the cards and the table. We wipe down immediately when they leave a table. They can ask for something. We have spaces in between slot machines, table games, restaurant components, stickers, things of that nature. We work with the department here, Hamilton County Sheriff's Department, which is great. I've been lucky with the employees I think I've talked about, and great partners like Jess, who talked about, but two of my individuals work for me came from within the casino table games, but outside the industry first. Eric, my manager, was a deputy sheriff with Hamilton County Sheriff's Department. Brilliant young man. who decided because of his family, he wanted to make a change for a bit more safety reasons and came here. But he has such a great investigative background that we take a look at, and he helps me out with that. And gets to work with me, which is obviously probably the best part of his day. We work with, particularly in OCCC, I want to talk about audit and gaming. There are two individuals who have a wealth of experience, Craig Donahue and Chris Fleener, that work from the audit side and the gaming side. We meet with them every single week, talk about issues. We have programs we have coming up, get their thoughts. They come back and tell us some items that are happening. Again, 24 hours a day, I could call and reach out and say, we have this issue. We need to talk about this. What do you think about that? Great individuals. Work with Amanda very closely, obviously work with enforcement on the OCCC, Mike, who's a wealth of knowledge. We work with our local here. We have 24-hour presence of agents who are law enforcement agents. I think that's very important. They're here 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They're just right across the hall. Stu Kepi is our senior agent here and fantastic individual, and helps us out greatly as we talk with patrons and other areas. We take a look at legal patron investigations. Sometimes patrons will talk to OCCC. They let us know about that. We investigate from the compliance side. There was a patron injured in some way, whether it be gaming, responsible gaming. We take a look at that and provide those investigations to them. And then I just talked about enforcement. You're a quiet group, or I'm just talking too much, and the question, but I know we'll open that in a second. We'll grab some water before we get to anti-money laundering, which is the thrilling part of the world. Anti-money laundering. So a large part of our job here, and some compliance officers in the United States, that's all they do in their jurisdiction, is we take a look at anti-money laundering, Title 31 of the Federal Code. I'm the designated bank security officer here at this property. My two individuals also work very, very closely. I mentioned Eric, and I have a young man by the name of Chin, who are just brilliant auditors, investigators, and we follow patrons. We want to know where the money is coming from, and people don't know this. It's fascinating. We took a look at a patron. We have software that identifies anomalies. We look to see why an individual comes in, why they're spending the way they are. Do they have the ability to spend that way? Do we watch what they do with regards to their financial transactions? We don't want illegal money here. Illegal could be money that is fake money. We do catch that every now and then, but it's not as prevalent as you might think. But is this money from drug enforcement? Is this from human trafficking? Is this what? Where is this money coming from? When a person goes to a slot machine and they have a stack of bills and they feed it into a machine and they don't play it all, but push a button, they receive a ticket. That ticket, they go up to the cage and they cash it out. They get the equivalent cash from us, which we call the clean money. We have ways, without going too in depth and keeping some of the mystery, but also just from a confidentiality reason, we have ways of looking at that and determining. We look at an individual, what's called from a KYG, know your guest. Some people call it KYC, know your customer. We want to know why an individual that perhaps is identified who works and has a $50,000 a year job is spending $1 million, $2 million here. There might be an absolute legitimate reason as to why, but why is that happening? And is it something for us to be concerned in those investigations? And we have ways of banning those individuals. We have to report to the IRS. The IRS investigates us. We just went through a very extensive IRS audit that was nearly 1.5 years to look at all our financial transactions, to look at our reporting, to look at our committee, to look at what we talk about with regards to that. The Director of Financial Crimes Network, FinCEN, is responsible for enforcing compliance within the Bank Secrecy Act. That presents part of the Department of the Treasury. It's political appointment, brilliant individuals that run that. Although Title 31 does apply to banking, does apply to healthcare, does apply to so many industries, it's really most commonly associated with casino and gaming, because in the 1950s, a lot of less than savory individuals realized, let's stop going to banks. Casinos are basically banks. They just happen to provide entertainment activities. But think about it, we provide credit. We take a look at credit ratings. we bring money in, we put money on deposit, etc. So we have to follow those type of very significant banking regulations to ensure we're doing the right thing. So that happened in the 50s, and that kind of spurned Title 31 with us. And then not telling any tales out of school, anything that's conducted more than $10,000 in a transaction in a 24-hour period, going in and out, we report that to the federal government. I love this quote. This is by Ken Belson. He's the FinCEN director that I was talking about, and absolutely believes in what a compliance officer does. Every time I have a committee meeting, I take a look at enforcement actions, what FinCEN has gone after an organization, a corporate individual, and I'm sorry to say, compliance officers. You'll see in the money trading business, such as a check cashing place or what have you, there are significant violations and fines against those properties, and compliance officers who are brought up not only federally on criminal activity, but are not even allowed to be a compliance officer in any type of financial organization or structure ever again. They have monetary fines against them as well. And it's the right thing to do. You want key people in here. You want people that have integrity. And in case Amanda's listening, the only thing I lie on is my golf score. That is it, but that has nothing to do with gaming whatsoever. But Ken talks about the importance for employees to understand that BSA is not some arbitrary rule that has to be followed, that BSA exists to protect them, their families, and what's so significant, the country. It doesn't matter the administration that's going on. We take a look at, we don't want money being funneled through here that are going to terrorist organizations or funding that. And we report that all to the federal government. And all our front-facing individuals here at the casino that work with the patrons, which is the vast majority, and go through Title 31 training, have to pass the test. I do refreshers with them constantly, much like responsible gaming, but every employee goes through responsible gaming training. They go and do tests, and something I'll talk about, Player's Edge, which I think is brilliant that we do as well. And here again, a couple of the reasons I talked about why Title 31 is important. We do deposit accounts, we do credit extensions, we do wire transfers, we check issuance and safety deposit boxes for people that have money. And I think that's a very important to see. There's a key responsible gaming element that we take a look at when an individual applies for credit. Besides their bank account, besides their credit history, besides what they do for a living, what their bank account is, we do a responsible gaming check. Can this person, from the very obvious, are they on a VEP list? Or less obvious, what they look like as they stand in front of the person providing credit? Is there alcohol? Is there things that we should be concerned about? And then there are certain levels here at the casino an individual may approve credit at. Player's Edge. With Horseshoe, Caesars, with Jack Entertainment, we had really great responsible gaming programs. I came into Hard Rock and met this man by the name of Paul Pellizzari, and met him about 2 years ago. And he is, again, the VP of Global and Social Responsibility. I think some of you know him. He and I have spoke at these programs before, mostly Paul, because he's the brilliant person and doesn't tend to go off on tangents about New England like I do, but a brilliant individual. And he set up this Player's Edge program. And I talk about it being more holistic. Not only do we identify and help, but it's holistic. It's everybody taking a look at, and we learn as to why it's important in a better way than my daughters. I teach history and HIPAA at some universities as an adjunct at times, and my daughters in college who are now happily graduated would used to call me and say, "Dad, we're about to go into a history class, and I know that guy was assassinated in sometime in the last century, and that started World War I. Why?" I'll tend to start talking about the beginning and Archduke Ferdinand and the problems with the family and how he ended up this way, and then the assassination, da, da, da. That's what Player's Edge is in a good way. It's holistic. Here are some of the areas we take a look at. We look at player education and referrals and what have you. We take a look at recognizing player risk profiles and apply interaction methods. We identify and respond to problem gambling signs and lead teams and player interactions and escalations. To me, the most significant thing, we do these great little theater deals where we have our employees together. Paul has these signs, they're randomly assigned. You could be the patron, you could be the table games person, whoever it is. And we hear comments made from individuals. Is that a concern of ours? Is it not a concern of ours? How do we do this? How do we do that? How do we interact? And it's not this quick half hour. We do this all day long. We did this just recently in October, where we brought all our team members together and we do this training. Then once a quarter, I meet with Paul, although I meet with him constantly about items. Are we doing the right thing? Do we have the right things? Also, our signs just on the floor with regards to what they look like, how they feel, what they say. Do we have the right messaging? And we take a look at that constantly from that standpoint. But the big thing here, right, is the goal is to prevent, mitigate harmful gambling so that players can gamble in a healthy way over long term. I told you to get out of my box a little bit. I have had some great conversations with individuals and never have gone to a casino before as a gambler until I came here and understood what responsible gaming is. And I'll always be very honest, and I hope you take this as how I mean it. I was one of those horrible people outside of a casino that thought, well, the gamble, that's their own fault for losing the money. It was other areas that I started to find out that helped me reverse that. And meeting people at PG&O, Stacy at the Ohio Department of Mental Health, other individuals that sat down with me. And a psychiatrist sat down one time and helped me talk and take a look at that as well about why this is. It happened with me in the military where I had an individual, and we'll talk about this next week in a great session that we're talking about the military, is who was addicted to cough medicine in Japan that I was stationed at. High level of codeine in their over-the-counter cough mixture. And incredible as much as it may seem to me at that time, that an individual could go through their entire bank account, lose their family, and be issued out of the military because of issues like that. Seeing what you guys do, talking to individuals, us sitting on these for a week, and again, we appreciate letting us talk, but hearing what you see out there with individuals is amazing. And sometimes, other than the direct contact with individuals, what we hear and how we get this experience with is fantastic. Another great thing about Players Edge, they connected it. Paul had a great suggestion for me. When a player comes in here and they want to comment about the food, about the temperature, about other individuals, sometimes they'll say something in their statement that Paul has helped me recognize might go beyond what they're really seeing, and perhaps we should have a conversation. Every day I get something called medallia, and these are scores. And guys, I'll be honest, 99% is your food was fantastic. Oh, I don't like the person that was sitting next to me. Why do you have masks? Things of this nature. But in those, every now and then is hidden a gem where somebody will say, yeah, it was a great place. I'm losing too much though. My family doesn't like me to be here. Those are segregated immediately. They're sent to me in a confidential way. I reach out to individuals and we get that type of help for them. What we do. I've been gabbing. I want to tell you one, let's bookend this with fun too, and then we can open it up. If there's anybody still out there in the world, sometimes I feel like I'm a mask. Compliance story in Ireland. So 6 years ago, I'd been here 2 years. My partner and I, at the time, he and I went to Ireland on a trip. We did the horseshoe going into Galway, and we went to Dublin, and we met a lovely couple that we were friends with then on a bus. And she was a school teacher in Great Britain. He was a member of the Royal Fusiliers Army. He diffused bombs. My husband is an interior designer, and I'm a compliance officer. And we were sitting in a pub, and we were talking about our different stories about working with children, about diffusing bombs, about organizing houses and furniture. And it came to me and I talked about, well, I work with rules and regulations regarding what we do at casinos, from anything from responsible gaming to tables and cards and dice and this and that. And the young man looked at me and said, boy, oh, if I had that job, I think I'd quit. It's what you take a look at it. It's what you see. I love doing this job. I hope that you understand how passionate I am about we're here to help. And I'm serious about that. This isn't click this off and I never hear again, oh gosh, next match, it's time again. We got to get involved in this. although apparently I don't know how to type hyphens in my presentations, that's my direct line to my desk. That is my email. Happy to give out my cell phone. You happen to be here and you want to walk around the floor, just you and I, my team, you want to talk, you want to do anything, we're here. You guys support us, and I hope I get that across, that sometimes we feel a bit left out there because we're neither for the casino or not. But what a great model PG&O is, what a great model responsible gaming is, what a great individuals you are as the individuals that talk to these individuals or support, whether you're administrative, whatever it is. We greatly appreciate it. I greatly appreciate this time. And if I can answer them, I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Great. Thank you so much, Robert. I am going to start with a poll question just to verify attendance, and then we'll pass it off to Mike to do some Q&A. I first want to say thanks because it was within the first 2 weeks of me working at PG&O that I came down to Hard Rock, and very green, still very green, but you guys down at Hard Rock were very welcoming, and want to say thanks so much, Robert, for that. I am going to now launch the poll question. Again, this is to verify attendance. If you cannot respond to the poll, if you cannot see the poll, that just means that your Zoom may be in full screen. So I'll put that in the chat as well. So make sure you're responding to that just to verify attendance for CEU purposes.
Is it shameful if I don't know the answer, or?
Yes, I think it is. So take a few moments to interact with that poll and respond to that poll. And then I will go ahead and pass it over to Mike Bazzelli to lead some question and answer.
Great. Yes, please complete the poll. That's how we know that you were here for the time, so you'll be able to get your CEUs. Thank you again, Robert, for a great presentation and for being here. And just some stuff coming in the chat is, great information, great presentation, great speaker. Wow, I didn't know so much went into compliance. So I think people learned a lot and found the information really interesting. I was going to save this to the end, but since you ended on kind of having a sense of pride, I think I'll just start with it. Joy from Sioux City, Iowa wrote in our area, the Hard Rock Casino in Sioux City is always welcoming and even proactive in having us, prevention specialists, come in to train their employees. The other casinos are not as welcoming and even antagonistic. This must have to do with the culture of the Hard Rock Corporation. So I wanted to read that chat to you so you could hear that. But I think it goes to a question that I was going to ask, just, is there a sense of pride, whether it's personal pride or a sense of pride and duty in having a robust and effective RG, responsible gaming program? So I think that's a question for you of Hard Rock Cincinnati, but then the greater Hard Rock International and Players Edge, and Paul spoke at length about it at last year's session. So could you go just a little bit more into the sense of pride around Players Edge and just having a robust RG program and what it means?
Yeah, and I appreciate that question so much, because I never want to make it sound, like we're disingenuous. Again, my eyes were really opened up by this when I came into the casino business and saw it. I have a story of, and I appreciate, no one takes offense to this and what have us, but us as Catholics out there in the universe, growing up that way, I would come up to the floor every day to go to Starbucks, and I'm addicted to Starbucks and love it. And I go out, and there was a nun that was always at a slot machine. Number one, I didn't know that nuns could do that. I, was always hit by them as a child growing up. But I remember talking to this individual and discussing why the individual was here and all. The night that we opened up as the casino, one of the audit tests that are done is the casino will ask somebody, hey, I want to go into the voluntary exclusion program, and they test us to ensure that we are doing that correctly. When you think about, listen, I can be mean and walk around here and say, we'll not do this, I need to do this. When we talk about an individual who is facing either minor gaming problems or I'm losing everything, I'm losing my family, I'll be honest, and hopefully my other counterparts will say the same thing, is I get a little nervous. I'm scared to say the wrong thing. I'm scared I'm scared to push it to the side because I got a meeting to go to, or, oh my God, this is happening, and make this too big. Player's Edge has really helped me. And again, I'm talking Player's Edge, and our other casinos have great, here in the state of Ohio, have great programs, is help me to identify that. But I think more important, make me stop being Robert Wamsley and listen, care, and get that help. To me, it's almost like the ABCs when somebody has a heart attack about, is there an airway? Is there breathing? Is there circulation? It's that, look at that individual and helping them out. Little things I didn't even think about. And this was I think the Ohio Department of Health and you and Amanda one day, we talked about when somebody comes here to go on the VEP program and wants to exclude or what have you, we used to meet them, do the paperwork. We did it on the floor. To me, that didn't seem like anything big. You all and the state and a couple others said, hey, how about if we build a special office away from the casino floor, away from that noise, away from everything, where they can relax and take a look, and it doesn't seem so bad. So I hope that answers that question. There is pride. There's nothing better than talking to an individual, getting them the help, hearing about success stories, hearing about failures, hearing about what we can do better. We are not prideful to say, we got this, we're okay. We're not. You guys are the experts, and we really rely on you for that. Hopefully that answered that in some way, and it didn't sound like a school teacher up here.
Absolutely. I'm going to ask one more and then go to some of the other questions submitted. But I wanted to ask, because based on the comments, there are a lot of people typing in, I'm new to this, I'm a newbie, or I'm learning a lot, I'm just getting into this. So that's great that we have a lot of new folks to the field at our conference, and hopefully they're getting a lot covering all the different areas: prevention, treatment, recovery, and then certainly compliance and responsible gambling. Because Jessica talked about it, new employee orientations, annual trainings and refreshers on responsible gaming. You mentioned it. I see that Matt is on, who I've done tours with and education with at the Columbus property. Because for some of the new folks, can you give us a ballpark? You probably can for Cincinnati, and based on size, a lot of the casinos are relatively the same size. How many folks work in a brick and mortar venue? Because when you're talking about training, not just tables and slots and security, but food and beverage and marketing, I think annual trainings about RG to every employee shows a commitment, because there's thousands of employees, right? How many employees typically work at a brick and mortar casino of your size?
So that's great. We kind of use ours as typical. They're larger, they're smaller. So we have 86 table games. We have over 1,900 slot machines. Employee-wise, we've gone from anywhere from when we first opened up at about 1,600 people to where we are now about 1,100 people. Out of those 1,100 people, everybody gets the RG training. So you initially come here, you sit down, we talk about responsible gaming. There is a training session that was developed in Florida. Paul, his group, and I say group, and I think that's important too, right? That we can focus and talk to Florida. They go through that training. They do that usually on their second day with us, on their second day of training. They have to pass a test. They have to pass a certain number. And we don't look at them and go, gosh, you couldn't pass it, for heaven's sakes, let's be mean to you. We'll sit down with that individual again and say, okay, where are we missing? Was there information you didn't understand? What happened? It's been rare that we haven't been able to get somebody to understand that and pass the test. Then we do refreshers once a year, but what I love about Player's Edge too, we do that quarterly. What I love about this is, before Robert Wamsley and his group did this, and we had this great support, now it's Robert Wamsley kind of is the Mike Buzzelli, is guiding our employees and our managers. So our managers of our department meet, we're now doing it once a month. What are you seeing out there? What are you hearing on the floor? Did the patron say this? Did the patron say that? And helping them understand education, understand the program. So then they go through and they get certified for that as well. So that's what we do specifically for that. That's the number of employees we have. Food and beverage tends to turn over than, let's say, more than a table games, a human resources department. I think that's key too. Table games right there at the table. They're going to hear a comment. They're going to see something. But an HR person that happens to be up on the floor at Starbucks, which is where I found my very first interaction. A young man at Starbucks in 2013, when I went to get my coffee, who was in the corner, and it was a Starbucks employee that took the RG training and said, Robert, that young man seems very upset about gaming. Like, not going into too much detail, talked with him. He had his tuition. His father happened to be there that weekend. Instead of paying it directly, gave him cash, and he lost it at our casino. So it was that Starbucks employee that alerted us to that.
Yeah, and that shows the necessity to give that training to everyone. And Matt typed in that his property in Columbus and Toledo are 600 to 800, and you said about 1,100. So a lot of people. So I think, again, you just showed the importance of giving that training to everyone. So that shows a commitment that you are training 600 to 1,100 people every single year. Claire typed in, how often would you say, and then this is a good segue from what you just said with Starbucks, how often would you say you and your staff approach a customer that are believed to have a gambling problem? You know, is that something that your staff would say they're having that conversation on a weekly basis, a monthly basis? You know, how often do those kind of instances get reported?
Great question. And again, I'll speak for Cincinnati, though. So much I do talk about my counterparts, Matt and Jess, and Lisa up in Cleveland, doing what we do. At least here, I want to say, honestly, weekly, we have some type of conversation. We're required to log it to keep statistics. I think that's important. I'm a data-driven individual. And we take a look at trends. So we look at that. So at least weekly. The comments that come from, as I talked about earlier, Medallia, where I might hear somebody talk about, great place, love the food, wish I wasn't losing so much money. We see that about every 2 weeks or so. And from some of those statistics, I got talking with OCCC one time, and this is 5-6 years ago. And they suggested, hey, is there a way to identify the individuals before they get into the casino? So with us at Hard Rock Cincinnati, person walks through, if they look like they're 30 or younger, they are stopped. Their ID is checked. And OCCC had a great idea where we upload information onto a scanner that's absolutely private and locked down. And I run the driver's license through, and it might alert me that's an Ohio VEP right there. We stop, we have the interaction with the player. That was an idea that you guys thought of, which I thought was absolutely brilliant. So at least weekly, we see trends happen around tax time. We see trends happen around holidays. Sad to say, and you guys can educate me much better on that, but you know, I was thinking that St. Patrick's Day is coming up, and we're going to see an increase of that type of connection and talks with individuals.
Yes, certainly, and March as a whole. And you just mentioned this. There was a question.
Mike, I can pop in for a second. We are at our time, but Robert, if you're available to keep conversations rolling, that would be lovely. I just want to make sure that people are able to know that the evaluation link has been dropped in the chat, so feel free to complete that. If you're able to stay on and continue the conversation and questions with Robert, we greatly appreciate that. And Robert, if you're able to stay on, then we greatly appreciate that too. But if you're not able to, we certainly understand, and we will resume at 1 p.m. You can either sign out of your Zoom link or just keep it running, and we'll keep chatting with Robert. Thanks for everyone who attended the morning session. And if you're not able to stay on, we'll see you back here at 1. So sorry, Mike, back to you.
You could tell me if my computer's slow. My computer says 11:50. Isn't the session going till noon? Maybe not.
Oh, is it noon? I'm sorry, then I got the time wrong. Anyway, let's keep rolling.
Yeah, I believe the session goes till noon. Is that correct, Corey? Can we give a head?
You're right.
First
Yeah,
noon.
Sorry.
Okay, so we've got 8 minutes. I've got 11:52. So we've got time for some more questions. You were mentioning the scores, Robert. There's a question on where do you get those from? Are those submitted online through surveys? Like how does a patron or customer submit that?
And I want to make sure I understand the question. I apologize if I said it right. The scores, how we obtain
The Medallia scores that you say great food, but I may be here too often. Where do those come from?
Great question. I should have said at the beginning, sometimes we're all in our professional word and we say things that we understand and perhaps others don't. So I really appreciate that. So Robert Wamsley comes to the casino as a patron. I'm sitting here, doesn't matter what level I'm at, but I have my player card and I use it as a slot machine, I use it as a table, some way that identifies me. Automatically, we send out a survey to that individual asking what their experience was. It's hooked up to a system, and here's a good compliance thing, that is segregated so no survey information, et cetera, is sent to an individual on the responsible gaming, self-excluded, et cetera. Robert Wamsley gets the survey, I do it online. Yeah, I love the food. And we found that online obviously is much better than what we saw with papers, 8 years ago. Fill it out real quick, and there's a place for comments. That goes to a secure system from a company called Medallia. They segregate Cincinnati, and this happens almost real time. It happens very, very fast. Every morning, but I can go 24 hours a day. I get a thing, hey, look at Medallia. I click into it, and I have a segregation for the compliance department. And keywords, key phrases, information is segregated for me. But here's the better part. Our executive assistant that works for our property president, Jennifer, who is a brilliant individual, much smarter than me, like most individuals, looks at every single comment every single day. And sometimes we'll find something that I missed, quite honestly, or that the computer didn't pick up, and will alert me to that. So hopefully that answers.
And then I guess what's the process? So my father Ken, who knows you well, Robert, said, you make compliance exciting and comprehensive. Thank you for the stories and presentation, great information. And then he wanted to know, then how do you connect with that individual?
Great thing. They can do this anonymously, but if we have a player's card and we see that type of information, my team will take it on first, right? So we see that, let's be mean to Corey for a bit. Corey's the one that has come to the casino. Corey has put his card in and had a comment. If I have his player's card, if I have any identifying factors that I can legally take a look at, and the Players Club is very robust and we can take a look at that information, I will reach out personally to that individual and say, hi, I'm Robert Wamsley, this is I am. We make sure we don't get a spouse, somebody else for protection, what have you. We leave a very generic information and ask them to contact us that way. So it's the responsible gaming advocates here at the property to do that, but I like to handle that first myself, if that makes sense.
Great, thank you. We've got time for just a few more. This goes to the money laundering. When reporting questionable exchanges with money, are cameras often used for evidence?
Yes, and without going in too much in depth, although you can read the Ohio law about how long we keep camera, absolutely. So being a surveillance officer is probably the next highest requirement, tough to be, take a look at requirements. But I can go down and say, hey, I think this guy named Corey was here, and we have his player card, and I know what time he registered at a slot machine. There are other ways that I won't go into that gaming equipment notifies us, meaning compliance, surveillance, if we see bill stuffing, things of that nature. So I see that on J1506, that at 12 o'clock, a person, it was stuffing bills, just putting bills in, pushing out, putting bills in, pushing out. I can go to surveillance, I can look down, see at the camera and see if there's really an interaction, if the person is just like looking real quick, mask, putting and stuff like that, or if the person is just there having a good time and what have you. And we certainly do look at the surveillance of that. I want to say also, one of my favorite things to say, God bless Hollywood. You cannot bring a balloon into a casino and steal the 50, 70, or $100 million we have. There are multiple cameras, multiple aspects, zoom, not zoom. They are everywhere. The only place in a casino here, and I'm sure it's with our others, that is not under camera is a private office like my office, or the changing rooms for the locker rooms or a bathroom. Everything else, the minute I'm done with this and I walk out, I'm on camera. Sometimes also helps out. 8 years ago, you can see now I'm just the poster child for physical fitness. But 8 years ago, when I retired from the Navy, decided physical fitness was not that important. I had a heart attack here on property. they were able to get to me quick because we have officers watching the floor continually in a live motion. Now, well, I was going to say something mean about my ex-wife, but let's just move on.
Let's I think this is a good last question to hit on, because I'll take it a step further. There was a question about, do other venues, attempt to skirt compliance or regulation rules and laws? Does this occur to your knowledge? And I think then a follow-up question to that would be where we started with Pride. I guess why would maybe a certain place want to skirt, some of the compliance or RG issues? Are they maybe just not as up to date or bought in on all that? And again, back to why you guys, hold that so highly.
Again, brilliance of the state of Ohio about how they take a look at things. And I can say this unqualified, that Matt and Jess and Lisa and myself are incredibly in tune with what we do, how we do it, why we do it, and we want to protect the patron. If the Ohio Casino Control Commission ever came to me and said, Robert, we gave you a license in the state to operate, and we don't see you doing that, that can be taken away. Our corporate license can be taken away. Besides that, it's just the right thing to do. I remember, and I'll make this as quick as I can. I can remember a long time ago when I was in the Navy and I went home real quick, and my father was there and we're at the breakfast table and he had a piece of tissue paper and he handed it to me and I opened it up and there was 2 quarters and 2 dimes, or 2 pennies. I said, Father, what is this? He goes, that's 52 cents that was in your pocket the last time you were here on leave. And we wanted to give it back to him. Like, Father, that's 52 cents. Who the heck cares about that? And why didn't you just take it? He said, well, Robbie, he's the only human being to call me Robbie. Robbie, it wasn't mine. I couldn't take it. That set me up that way. So we here in Ohio, it's because of the legislature, OCCC, and I think the individuals. There are other jurisdictions, I'm not trying to slam them, but look, it's money driven. It is, and I'm just being honest, this is Robert Wamsley's opinion. It's money driven. It's don't look at that because we could be fined, we could look at bad, we want to continue with business and things. Most of the jurisdictions in the United States, they certainly have a compliance officer looking at anti-money laundering specifically. And they have other ways to take a look at about software and what have you. But hey, it's the right thing to do. And I know my counterparts in this state absolutely believe the same thing.
Great. Thank you very much for all of that information and the story sharing. If you have not gotten enough of Robert, which you probably haven't because he's a great speaker, Tuesday, March 23rd, the listening lunch session is with myself and Robert. You've heard that he's a Navy vet, and Nick Ramirez, who works on the prevention side and is a member of the Cuyahoga Problem Gambling Coalition. We're going to have a little lunch discussion on gambling in the military and how to work with the military and veterans around responsible gambling. So please join us on Tuesday, March 23rd for that. And thank you again, Robert. I'll turn it over to Corey.
Thank you, guys.
And Cheyenne has once again put the evaluation in the chat, so please complete that. And one thing in the chat that I wanted to make note of is, and I've lost it, thanks to everybody who's chatting in. Lynn wrote, give Derek, Mike, Karen, and Amanda some credit to building trust among the properties in Ohio. The first few years, many properties were not welcoming to PG&O, treatment professionals, and visitors. And I think it was a two-way street, definitely. And I feel as we as a state are a much better place to recognize the collaborative nature of the work that we have. And my approach, and hopefully it will be an approach that you all have as well, is when someone calls the Ohio Problem Gambling Helpline, or when somebody calls for a treatment organization, that's someone that could have had help a whole lot earlier. And the reason that we work so closely with the properties, there's a variety, but the primary one for me is that those folks that are working on the floor day in and day out can be those first responders for those that are showing signs of problems. And that's why it's important for us to work so closely with the properties to ensure that they're not only understanding what the impact of gambling can be, but also the resources that are available locally. And while we weren't able to have our property tours last year due to COVID, and obviously for Problem Gambling Awareness Month, when we typically have them, we won't be able to do it again this year. It is my hope that pending vaccine rollout, et cetera, that as we roll along to Responsible Gaming Education Week in September, that's something that we'll be able to reestablish. As I look in the chat and see many of you seeing this is pretty new to you, the property tours are a way for those that are coming from a prevention or treatment background may not have had the experience of being to a casino, or if you have really understanding the responsible gambling or voluntary exclusion measures that are available there, to have those experience and ask those questions, much like we've had here, in more of an intimate setting where you've got 8 or 10 people that you can kind of go along and see these things with. So thank you to Robert, and thank you to the other responsible gaming folks that we work with on property, because it really is a collaboration of all the work that we do, and so critical in getting people the help they need as early as possible.